You went from the office pet to the office threat.
Yes, exactly. And I pretty much went through what the protagonist in Devil Wears Prada goes through.
Welcome to the Immigrant Experience in America, an immigrant human library, where we amplify and humanize the experiences of immigrants in the United States and around the world. Listen in as we add another story to our immigrant human library.
I started working as an assistant editor at at a small publishing house, and I start doing really well, but that begins to kind of threaten the person in between. So my editor in chief and my CEO, they're super happy with my work, but the person in between, right? She does not like it, and
Yeah,
she had got rid.
you went from the office pet to the office threat.
Yes, exactly. And I pretty much went through what the protagonist in Devil Wears Prada goes through. So initially, it was all rainbows and unicorns, and it was amazing. And they loved the fact that I'm doing all this work. I get a bonus, this and that, and then somewhere down the line, what happens is 6 to 7 months into my first real job, I get a call in the middle of the night from my mother, who's very concerned again about my brother. He had completely stopped meeting people and locked himself inside the apartment, and my parents were very concerned, and they had not disturbed me at all. Now it's been at least 2 or 3 years that I'm in America, right? And I'm hearing all this about my brother, and I'm very concerned. So they want me to make a quick trip, and I just got the bonus and things like that. So I'm like, it's not a great idea to want to like you don't want to in your first job after 6 to 7 months just make a trip back home to India, but it seemed extremely dire. And so I asked my bosses, and they were like, okay, they'll let me go for 2 weeks. And I finished all my work. But when I come back from India, the whole situation in the office has completely changed. It's like an upside down world where all of a sudden that girl has now started painting me as a person who's incompetent, and she has to work so hard on my writing, and that she's exhausted because not only is she doing her work, she's also doing my work. And when somebody starts gaslighting you like that, it if you're from that country, right? If you're from that sort of uh, society, you can probably just pick it up very quickly, which I was able to see. She's tried to do that to somebody else, and that girl immediately was able to switch tracks, quit that place, and find another job, in a matter of months. But I did not have that liberty because after I'm already 6 to 7 months in, right? Your OPT, like on a student visa, you get an extension to work for a company. But within that time, you have to allow that company to believe in you so much that they will be willing to sponsor you. I don't have that kind of time, right? And so I'm running out of time, which is like how many more months? Another 5 to 6 more months, right? And now I'm being painted as this completely useless employee. And she is sending me emails, and she is not only doing that, she's like very harshly worded emails along with behavior where she's shouting and stomping in front of everyone, um, exactly like what happens in the film, throwing things at my table and things like that. I tolerate that for months until I start losing my confidence, and actually I start making mistakes, because as a writer, the most important thing is confidence, is believing in your voice, right? Is believing that you can figure out how to get the articles in, and also weed through all the mistakes, and have all the mounting pressure on you in terms of so many deadlines, but still be able to work with a certain degree of integrity and perfection, right? That just completely went out the window, and I started making mistakes which I hadn't made before. And when it reached a point where I realized that what I'm up against is pretty much workplace harassment, I decided to have a sit down with my editor in chief to discuss what I could do to improve my performance. And the next day, my CEO called me and fired me. And now I've been fired, and I think at that point I had just less than 2 months to try and find a job. Otherwise, really, I would have to go back literally to where I came from, right? Because now I'm on independent track. So I don't have the liberty of staying in United States if I don't have the sponsorship. So I was at that point forced to go on the spousal visa. And when I go on the spousal visa, then I face the stigma with so many. So in 2015, the law had been changed. I came to America in 2013, right? So by up until 2013, these women, they did not have the legal right to work. And in the earliest framework of the existence of this law, they could not even have a social security number, or like if their spouses did not allow them to say even drive a car, they could not do it, right? Or have an independent bank account and things like that. 2015, this law changes. So I'm in 2016 when all of this happens. I got the spousal visa. I know that the spousal visa now allows women to work. Spouses can now work after 2015. But the stigma associated with the spousal visa remained. So every time I go out for an interview with a very spectacular resume, right? The only questions that I keep getting asked is about my immigrant status and what visa is this? And as soon as I tell them it's the H4, they get spooked and I don't hear back. And so this
explain the stigma. What is it that your husband will leave and you will also leave? What's that stigma? I'm not aware of it.
So basically, the spousal visa did not allow these women to work at all up until 2013, right? So all these highly skilled immigrants who were mostly men, they came to America as doctors, engineers, or like scientists and things like that. And this was in the year 1990 that their wives were allowed to, like their spouses were allowed to join them. And when they were allowed to come into America, they were allowed to stay here and kind of support their husbands or be with them, right? But they were not given the legal right to work. So they could just live in America, they could not work in that earlier rendition of the law. So the spousal visa already had that framework, right? Which eventually changes in the year 2015. So 2 years after I come to America, women are allowed to work. But for so many years, that had not been the case, right? So people in the, employers and companies, they kind of knew that certain visas have certain work restrictions. So when I go out, because when I lose my job and I lose my independent track, now I have to switch to the spousal visa. And as soon as I go on the spousal visa and I'm in, interviewing almost on a daily basis, sending, applications or reaching out to prospective employers and things like that. As soon as I mention that I'm on the H4 spouse visa, they get spooked and they don't return my call or I don't hear back from them at all. So I did not even understand what's going on because I just thought that perhaps there is something wrong with my resume. But when 1 year turns to 2 years, turns to 3 years, turns to, when 100 applications turn to 200 applications turn to, so I'm now beginning to realize that something else is going on, right? I reach a point of absolute breakdown and I pretty much lock myself in my apartment, depressed, angry, completely bereft of hope. This is for close to about 2 to 3 years before the lockdown. I completely go into isolation. And it's very ironic because in terms of the economic comforts of my life, I have all of them, right? Because I'm married to a doctor. But I cannot find a basic job. And I then understand the kind of prison or gilded cage that many such highly skilled immigrant women have been forced to live in, right? Too scared to talk about what it means to not have the agency over their life because they have to depend on husbands in the 21st century for everything that they do, right? So they're living per the rules of Victorian age in the 21st century, and close to about 500,000 such women still exist It's just that people don't know about it. But that's when I actually hit the low point and I experienced that shame and that sort of, you lose your entire identity, you know, when you can't work and you're such an intelligent, hardworking person, right? You completely lose your identity. You completely lose your independence and freedom, and you almost become an infantilized version of yourself. So, from being a person who would go out and take risks and things like that, I became like a shadow of myself who would oftentimes ask my husband, "Hey, can I do this? Do you think I can do this?" And he had to see that, you know, that fiery spirit which he fell in love with completely go away, and he wither away, and he saw what it's like in front of his eyes, you know, how I became almost like, I stopped taking a bath. I stopped, yeah, I because there was no point, right? This is what happened to people during lockdown, right? When they would not take care of themselves because they couldn't go outside and things like that. But imagine for me, this is going on for now 3 years and over.
2015,
Yeah,
2015 to 2018
it's,
into 2019.
yeah. And so the darkness was so real that I would just wait for my husband to go to the hospital. And as soon as I knew that he's gone and he's not coming back home, I would start drinking. And every day, I would just drink to kind of numb the pain of absolute hopelessness. Yeah. So I hit a very low point in my marriage and in my life during that time before the lockdown.
Wow. I hear you. And I wasn't aware of the struggles of the H4
Yeah.
spouses.
Yes.
So you're sharing so deeply about like your journey through that.
I was able to turn my life around. Once I hit that really, really dark point, I was able to turn it around. And that's when I believe that my story actually begins. Yeah.
Right. So I'm wondering, you're here, your husband is providing, you're being cared for, you had a smooth upbringing, your parents prepared you for the world and you were provided for. But
Yeah.
yet, but yet you still had this inner drive that your worth was tied to having a job.
Yes.
Like where did was that the tiger mom pressure, your husband's pressure, maybe your parents' pressure, that whole Indian dynamic of achievement and you are possibly your work. Some people can look from the outside and kind of get that sense from the Indian culture like you are your work, right?
Yeah, yeah, because
So
yeah, that is pretty much my identity, because I also, I started working at the age of 21, right? So and in fact, like I told you, I'm a writer and I'm an artist. So for me, even if I wasn't like working for a publishing house or a magazine, right, I can still in some ways find employment out of that, or like outside that world, in terms of freelance opportunities or do something with my time and things like that. But what I experienced was what these women experienced, who were doctors or lawyers or engineers, right? Who, when they came to America, a doctor needs to work in a hospital. They've been trained with a lot of rigorous kind of like, training, right? To work and serve patients. If you ask that woman who grew up with that idea of kind of being of being a doctor to now stay at home, she will she will not know how to make sense of that. Also, you will have to then kind of depend in every which way in terms of money on your partner, right? So and it's not just about money. It's basically you don't your entire like existence in America is on the paperwork which your husband owns, right? So there have been several cases of, for example, emotional or domestic sort of violence between spouses, where if suppose the person is of a very controlling nature, and then you're just absolutely afraid of even asking for basic liberties, right? And so if a woman has been brought up with the idea of being a professor, like my dad expected me to, right? Being this academic, or like I expected myself to be this superstar in advertising when I joined that. The imagination that you're going to just stay at home, right? Be a stay-at-home mom, or like not that there's anything wrong with that, but if you grow up with that idea, it just kind of doesn't make sense, because you're as ambitious, I'm as ambitious as, say, my husband, right? I want to use my time to kind of create value through my talents, and that was not available to me at all. And so when I started explaining that to folks back home, they did not understand it, because first of all, my none of my friends could empathize with what I was going through, because I'm married to a doctor, I live in New York City, and I have the money, right? But actually, I have very little agency over my life. Everything, everything in my life is being provided to by my husband. And I initially did not understand what it would be like. My husband had told me that I would never want you to be on the spousal visa, because this is what he has seen happening to women, right? And when he explained it, I did not understand it. But when I went through it on a day-to-day basis, when all those years started climbing, and you don't know what you're supposed to do with your time, because your husband's constantly away at work, right? And even if he was around, you just become a shell of a human being, because there's no value that you are kind of contributing to each other. So I kind of like, this is exactly what like women in the Victorian age, when they were told that you can just stay at home and you can take care of the estate, money is taken care of, you don't have to complain, right? You don't have to work. So when that right to work is taken away from you, then you understand what is it like, what does it feel like in terms of losing everything that you define yourself by, right? And so like what Margaret Atwood has kind of created, right, in that entire book that she wrote, that is exactly the kind of woman which I thought I was, because around me, you know, American women do not have the restrictions that I have, but I'm feeling, in spite of having everything, I feel the pain of being a so-called handmaid. So that's exactly what I felt like. And I could not talk about it with members of my family, because when I tried explaining it to them, they could not see why I was so depressed, or why, because they thought, you have everything. What are you even crying about? Stay at home or go shopping. How much can you shop? And this is when I understood that what it looks like, from the outside. Sometimes people can look like they have all the so-called economic resources or privileges, but nobody can actually know what it's like, to be in their shoes. But when I hit that low point, I started researching the internet about the stories of these women. And I found like close to about 15, 20, and many more such anonymous Facebook groups, or groups on like people posting on Reddit and things like that. And I actually realized the horrors of this spousal visa, which had been spoken about as the depression visa. And women, so if people just go on Google and you just type in the H4 spousal visa, or just type the depression visa, because that's what it's known by in the community. And many of these women, right, they're not married to doctors, they're married to people who may not have those resources, but the conditions remain similar, right? They have faced extreme mental turmoil. And as an immigrant, you're already extremely isolated, right? Because you speak differently, you dress differently, you don't have that kind of community or support. You have to try and build it from scratch. And then on top of that, your house or your apartment becomes your kind of prison, because if you don't even work, what do you do? So you're forced to become like a housewife, because then you start filling your entire day with household chores or with cooking and cleaning. Or even if you don't want to be a mother, you're like, fine, I guess I'll just have kids. But what kind of a mother are you going to be if that is a choice which is brought upon you, not out of free will? So this is what I stumbled upon, this entire huge community of shame that still exists. But before I found them, before I actually learned about these women and things like that, my marriage had reached a point of sort of no return, because my husband would come back home after a very hard and long day at work, right? And here he would find his angry drunk wife, just trying to blame everything on him. Yeah, because I kind of turned against him, right? Because a spousal visa is not possible without a spouse, right? So, I was just like, and he tried very hard. He tried to give me solutions. He was like, why don't you go to evening college? Why don't you completely do something different? Maybe writing is not it. Maybe try engineering, right? Maybe try something else. Maybe. And so here he is asking me, after I've already started my journey from scratch, right, in America, to start all over again, right? And at that point, you're already so broken down. You feel like a failure. I was living in a very fancy apartment in Long Island City. And it basically, as soon as you would step out into the balcony, you could see Manhattan. You could see the Chrysler building. It's beautiful, right? People would kill to be in that apartment, right? And now, after years of therapy, I know that the reason I never stepped out into the balcony was because I was scared that I'll jump. So and I would keep telling him that because these are glass towers, right? I would keep telling him that everybody around me, they can see me and they can see what a big fat failure I am. That's how I felt. And so he tries really hard. He tried really, really hard to get me out of that nightmare until he started getting affected. So he's like, Varuni, only you can heal yourself. So I'm going to go away and I'm going to leave you to solving this problem on your own. Because as long as you have me around you, you'll continue to blame me for everything that's happened to you. And I'm really sorry, but I think the only way this can work is if we have some distance between us. So he took up a job at that point in Los Angeles, and he said, you can continue to stay here or you can downgrade to another apartment. But before he went and bought a dog, because he thought that maybe a therapy dog would help me. So he researched that a golden lab dog is something which helps individuals who are in this kind of a mental crisis. And he even trained the dog. And then after that, he just left us. And he's like, I'm going to come back and check on you. I'll call you. But this is something that only you can walk out of. And I think it requires a lot of courage to leave somebody in that situation, knowing fully well that if things go wrong, they can go really wrong, right? And so he leaves me, goes away to Los Angeles. And at that point, surprisingly, what he had said did happen, because I didn't have anyone to blame, right? So all of a sudden, now I'm inside this apartment and I didn't want to be inside it because I was like, I now know I was scared. So I take my dog, who's this young puppy, and he needs walks because he would start chewing through my shoes, right? So I was like, I need to get out of the apartment because he won't let me sleep. He just wants to walk all the time. And we just start walking on the streets of New York every day. In fact, different boroughs of like different neighborhoods of Brooklyn is where it starts from. And I start walking for 1 hour, 2 hours, close to about 4 to 6 hours on certain days. But I just don't go back home to my apartment. And as I'm walking the streets, a very strange thing happens. People on the streets of the city, they randomly start talking to me. And this was a time when, this was a time like this in America where elections were going to happen, right? And everybody was divided into enemy camps, right?
Right, that's 2020. Is around 2020 or something, or is it 2016?
This had started. So my husband, like this entire process was 2016. It had already started, and this again continues for So this entire process continues for 2 to 3 years in my life. It still happens sometimes, but that was election year, and all of America looked like two enemy camps. And everyone was like, everyone was suspicious of the other in media. That's what it looked like, right? But I'm out in the streets, and as I'm walking the streets, I have these random encounters with strangers who start approaching me. I hardly ever approach them. And they would just come to me and they would start sharing. They would just start talking to me. And then they would start sharing things about their life, whatever they're going through. And initially, I found it odd that it's happening at a frequency that almost seemed like I've developed some sort of psychic powers to attract individuals. Because it would happen in the morning, it would happen in the evening, it would happen the next day. And people would start, once they would start talking, they would just tell me a lot of personal details about what they're going through in their marriages, what they're going through in their relationships, if they've lost a dog, if if something really bad happened with their friend. And I found it very strange that it's my job to stand here and listen to this person just going on and on about their life. But slowly, as I start listening to their stories, I actually realize what real tragedies are like, when somebody could actually lose all their money, when somebody could actually lose a limb, or their wife or their husband dies, right? Because some of these people had been through those experiences. uh, and and as I'm listening to these stories, I'm like, Varuni, what are you even crying about, right?
Yes,
That
give
you're
you
crying, you're,
perspective.
yes.
Perspective.
I'm
Wow.
like, these people had been through some real trauma in their life. There was this guy who just couldn't stop looking at my dog. And then he was like, I'm sorry, can I just hug him? And I'm like, yeah, sure, hug him. And then he's like, he just looks like my Roger. And these people, they got into my apartment, and there was the CCTV camera was on, and I saw the whole thing. And they put my dog in the bag, and they took my dog away. And I provided that entire thing to the cops, and the cops still couldn't find my dog. And you know what it's like when you lose a dog like that? It's like somebody kidnapped your baby. And then he just completely broke down. And like and I'm just standing there. This is a fully grown man who's crying about losing his dog. And that dog was like a child to him, right? Or there was this other guy who was basically very attached to his mother-in-law. And he and his mother-in-law had this very close relationship because she used to love making food for him, until he developed a sort of cancer. And so they had to remove his esophagus or something. And so now he could only have liquid food. So he's talking to me about how he lost that relationship with his mother-in-law, because he cannot chew food, right? So they're like simple stories like that, and then there's some very tragic stories as well. And then as I started talking to more people, the people that I met on the streets happened to be homeless people. And that's when I realized, that people who have nothing, absolutely nothing, not even a place to sleep under, right? Sometimes those people, they can give you a lot of insight into what life is really about. There was this guy called Mario who wanted to just have a cup of coffee with me, and Starbucks would give him the coffee for free. So, and he never wanted me to buy the coffee for him. Nothing. I wanted to buy him breakfast on a couple of days, that because since we used to sit and talk to each other, we'd kind of become like friends. And he would never want me to buy anything for him. The only thing that he wanted, whenever we happened to meet, was a decent conversation from one human being to another. That's what Mario wanted. And he would sometimes tell me that he feels really sorry for some of his friends who have very, who have these major diseases because of which their body goes into a fit and things like that, and they cannot get medicine, and they have to sleep outside. And he's so grateful to God that he only has asthma, that it's not as bad for him, that he can still find places in the city to sleep. And imagine that he is grateful to God that he just has asthma, right? And that he can still find a tree to sleep. And here I'm living in a fancy apartment, right? And crying and wailing about how horrible my life is. just because one thing in my life did not work out, and that was not being able to find a job. And that's when my entire perspective on life, marriage, love, everything goes, you know, turns around. And I decide I'm going to work for the homeless in the city. And so I start looking desperately for what are the places that I can volunteer at. And then I find the Bowery Mission. The Bowery Mission invites me, and they're like, okay, you know what? We think that instead of that, we have another job. It's to teach kids in certain neighborhoods in East Harlem. Can you teach these kids art and creative writing? Because we're trying to create a community so that some of these kids who are at high risk because of like a certain, they want the kids to be off of the streets, so they want to create workshops which are constructive for the kids to be involved in. So I was like, great, I'll do that. So I go to East Harlem, I start teaching these kids art and creative writing, and it's one of the most amazing time that I spend with these kids. And they teach me more about love, about humanity, about laughing every day, about the games that they play, right? And they heal me through their presence rather than me trying to really teach them anything. They taught me more. And these kids, and then again, they come from families and backgrounds where if I was to compare economically, their mothers had to really struggle hard, right? Their families sometimes are, they don't know how they're going to figure out how to pay the fee for school and college and all of those things. I didn't have those problems, right? So again, I'm like, open your eyes, Varuni. So as I start healing, right, and as I start coming around, that's when my anger starts going away, my depression starts going away, and I begin to also realize through my all these encounters that I'd had on the streets of New York, right, that the world that we see presented in the media, which the world that we see where one person is being played against the other by politicians, this world is not the real world. The real world is the human beings that you meet on a daily basis. Focus on what they are showing you, right? And when you focus on that, you will find that there is more love in this world rather than hate.
Yes.
And
Wow.
yeah,
Wow.
and that's the only, it's only when I came to that realization, Simone, that my husband was able to come back to me. It's almost like a test that the universe, because I had gone to a place of resentment and isolation, and like nobody likes me, nobody wants me, and that's what you're also hearing in the media, right? Especially during election time, things like that. But no, the real world that I met on the streets, that I went to, and when I worked with kids in Harlem, I'm the same person who taught Harlem Renaissance, right, at a university in New Delhi, and thought she understood everything about race and identity and being underprivileged. No, I did not, until I experienced only a fraction of what it's like to lose something that you care about, right?
Wow.
And that's when I was able to benefit from what they gave me rather than what I gave them.
Wow. I've been having this thought and I'm like, I don't want to lose it. I don't want to lose it. It's interesting because, the comment that your dad made about, raising you to be a feminist and the strong woman.
Yeah,
But it's interesting that you came to America and the journey that you went on really took you in the other side as to why feminism is so important. Have you
yes,
realized that?
yes,
Being at home and being that privileged wife and everything being provided for you,
yeah,
and then realizing that the lack of agency that you don't have, and why women perhaps fight for women to have that agency because of the gilded cage, as you mentioned, that they live in,
yes.
not being able to express their career aspirations or mental aspirations, whatever you want to put on it. I mean, you lived it.
Yes, I lived it. And I didn't know that this is what is taught to in the university, right, as the first wave of feminism, or the second wave. And in the first wave of feminism, women did not have the right to vote, or could not work, and things like that, right? And so you study this as a student, you study this in an academic framework, and then when you actually live it, you understand what these women actually fought for, right? You don't understand it until, like, somebody says that, yeah, stay at home, go shopping, essentially means be a beautiful painting or like be like this beautiful flower in a vase. But if you are actually forced by life to live those circumstances, that flower is going to rot. It's going to completely rot. Like I have curly hair, right? During that time, my hair was like dreadlocks because I stopped combing it. I was not taking a bath. I was not eating proper food. First, I lost all my weight and then looked very emaciated and almost scary because my eyes were like going in. And then out of like fear of looking at what I looked like in the mirror, I started like shoving calories down my throat. And then I accumulated a lot of unhealthy weight, you know? And it's just walking on the streets that not only made me strong and fit again, just with a dog, but it actually made my heart. It cured my heart more than anything else. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, what a journey. The interesting thing is, I wonder if your husband kind of anticipated that that's what you needed, the dog to get you out, which
Yeah.
is,
I don't know
I'm
what it
wondering.
was. Yeah, I don't know what it was, but he is in some ways, he belongs to the world of medicine, so he's a very rational man, but he also is very intuitive. So there are days where he is kind of feeling sad in the morning and he's like, I'm very worried about this patient, you know. So he has some of those things, but he I think believed that this is the only way I will be able to solve this problem, because you cannot change the weather, you can't change the politics of a land, you can't change what's going to happen to you in a day. You can change your reaction to it, right? We can only control how we will respond to circumstances, right? And so that is essentially what he realized, was that there are certain factors which are completely out of his control. People on the H-1B, or like kids of even people on the H-1B, if they've come here not born in America, right? The time for them to actually get their green cards and become citizens is anywhere between 17 years to 150 years. That's how long the queue is, right? And there are different kinds of immigrant categories, and immigrants from different parts of the world have different kind of such challenges and things like that. So I personally feel that people can get very depressed and bogged down if they start focusing on just those things. But if you focus on what you can do, right, with your time, with your life, with the here and now, with what you can control, you can actually do something out of even circumstances which look really difficult and different from what you're used to. But also, when I start like healing and he comes back home, right? It's not that like when you become okay, like when you become mentally okay, it's not that there's one fine day that you get up in the morning and you're completely fine. No, your nightmares still stay with you. You still have the anger, and the pain is still somewhere inside of you. That is why people say that healing takes place in phases, right? It's not just a miracle. So we were living in Bed-Stuy during that time, and I was walking my dog on the streets, and my husband was it was a very important day for him and a very difficult surgery. So he was there in the hospital. I could not just call him. And this is, George Floyd had happened just 2 days ago, and I had just heard about it, but everything in Bed-Stuy was pin drop silence, and people were very shaken up. The whole community was shaken up. I had not seen the video, but I happened to see the video just then. I happened to see what's happened. And my entire anger, my entire helplessness and hopelessness came back in an instant. And I was like, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be in this situation. I don't want to try and figure out what my life's going to be like, even though my husband was back and things had started looking much better, right, in my life. In that instant, all of it came back, and I could not focus on how I was walking my dog. And suddenly the leash just went off of my hand. The harness came off completely because my dog pulled in a certain direction. And so he doesn't have a leash, he doesn't have a harness, he's completely naked, right? And he got really frightened and he ran straight into oncoming traffic. right? And I just froze. And before I found my voice, there were 4 to 5 guys on the streets who saw this happening. This is a major traffic intersection in Bed-Stuy, and traffic is coming with full speed. And you know, in New York City, nobody puts their life on the line, right? You just move on, you do your thing. But these 4 guys, right, they just jumped in. They just jumped straight in, and they just held my dog from different, like, you know, he's a big, strong dog. They just held him, and he's trying to claw his way out. And they dragged him out. The traffic actually stopped, Simone. And
Yeah, because I
yeah,
guess
and
they saw the guys, because
they
they
saw
probably
the guys.
they wouldn't have
Yeah,
seen the dog, but they saw the
yeah.
guys.
They saw the guys, and they pulled him away. Like, they pulled my dog into the corner on the sidewalk where I was sitting. They made me feel okay. Then they found the harness. They found everything. When they were sure that I could take care of my dog, it's only then that they left me. And these guys, they were all from different races, different ethnicities. And again, God or life was showing me that, Varuni, fix your anger. Don't focus on, it's very tragic what's happened in the news, but look at also that is an example of hate, and it's very wrong what has happened. And you know, but in front of you, this is an example of human beings as well, who put their life at complete risk to save your dog, that dog who was able to make you get up back on your feet again, right? So this is an example of love. Focus on love.
Join us next time for part 3 of this episode. We thank our listeners around the world, and we appreciate your continued support as we build our human library. Please remember to give us a 5-star review, subscribe, and share with your friends, family, and circle of influence.